welcome back everyone to another episode of the Practical Planner podcast. We have a very special guest today. So I think if you're in this space, you probably know him. His name's Adam Nash. He is the CEO and co-founder of Daffy, but he's done a lot of really cool things, run a lot of really great businesses. I mean, if you go through his LinkedIn, it's like, okay, you probably aren't going to find anybody much more impressive than him. President and CEO of Wealthfront. He was at LinkedIn, he's at Stanford, just a bunch of really cool things. And we're going to talk today a lot about donor advised funds. But before we get into that, Adam, anything that you want to kind of introduce or say about yourself? And then let's go into talking a little bit about Daffy and the company.
It's wonderful to be here. This is one of those topics that's very important, but probably doesn't get discussed enough until people realize that they have to make important decisions. And for me, founding Daffy and building out this platform really oriented around giving and thinking about giving both in your lifetime and multi-generational giving has been a great joy for me. So very excited to be here and talk about things.
Yeah, and I'm curious how the company came about, right? Because I think a lot of, the origination of people and their companies came from some life story, right? I mean, for wealth, it's, Roth went through his, estate planning. It was like, there's got to be a better way to do it. And that kind of sparked this whole company, this whole idea. So I'm curious for you, what sparked the want to create a business around donor advised funds?
Yeah, well, it's funny because, these founder journey stories are always interesting because the truth is a company doesn't come from one place. There are these different threads that come together. It makes sense looking backwards, right, connecting the dots, but not always going forward. And the truth is the donor advised fund was always on my list of kind of amazing financial products that most people have never heard of, right? So it was always on that list of great opportunities to do something new. But Daffy came from a very simple place, actually. With my co-founder Alejandro, we were thinking about different products and services and platforms to build. And it really just struck us that, last 10 or 15 years, you've seen all this incredible innovation, all these new features and platforms and apps and services to help people spend better, to help them save better, to help them invest better. But where was giving? I mean, and giving isn't just a normal financial task. It's not just an item on your budget. I mean, people care deeply about giving. They teach their children to give. It's a moral and ethical. It's a question. It's a way to live your life. And so this idea of taking all this incredible technology, all this innovation of the last 10 to 15 years and focusing it on giving is really the heart of where Daffy came from. And we were struck by the fact that, there's about 60 million American households who give to charity every year. But at the time, less than 1 million people had donor advised fund accounts. And so that was where Daffy was born, that idea. Daffy stands for the Donor Advised Fund for You. There's always a little bit of a thing that happens when you have an engineer do the naming. It's like right on the nose.
I didn't know the FY was for you. I thought it was just kind of like a play on DAF, but that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious on that stat you just said about number of donor advised funds. Do you have any idea what that average balance is?
I actually don't. That data doesn't get often reported, although I do know it for some of the larger platforms. And the accounts do skew a little bit large. So the median account, I think, in the industry is tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
But I don't think that tells the whole story. And we all know, because the press loves talking about billionaires, there are quite a few, 9-figure and even larger donor advised fund accounts out there on the major platforms and others. But there's also quite a few small ones. This is one of the things that Daffy really specializes in, is that we cater to accounts of all sizes, right? Mm-hmm. Our minimum to get started, we really believe that giving is one of these things that once you start and you find a good platform, you tend to keep doing it. So we make it very easy to get started. I think the minimum contribution on Daffy is only $10. It's free for under $100 just to get started. But just in the years that we've been operating, we've seen accounts 6 figures, 7 figures, even 8-figure accounts coming in. And so we see this across the board. I mean, I'll give you an example. Our stock contributions. Our largest stock contribution to date has been over 12 million, but the median is only about $6,000, right? And so I think that reflects the fact that depending on where you are, time of life, and what the situation is, Giving is something that people mostly do on an ongoing basis, right? We tend to support the same organizations year in, year out, right? It might be our kids' school, it might be our alma mater, it might be a national organization, it might be a religious organization, a church or synagogue. And so those amounts tend to be regular. And then when special things happen, the opportunity presents itself to have a bigger impact, either during our lives or or afterward. You tend to see those larger donations go out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was asking because I most often see they're small, and I think they're underutilized in the right way. I mean, I serve very high net worth clients, so it's a tool that we talk about every single year. But I think before I go into this, let's just talk about the benefits of using a donor advised fund.
Oh yeah, happy to. And I think there's quite a few benefits, both for individuals and for financial advisors in terms of their relationship with their clients.
There's the financial side, right? And then
Right.
there's the impact side.
Yeah, the biggest advantage, I think, to the donor advised fund is frankly that it's just a better system for giving.
Yep.
I mean, you and I both know that people would have a lot of trouble, even wealthy people, saving for retirement or planning for long-term goals if they didn't have separate accounts, separate plans for those goals, right? So the 401k and the IRA really have increased retirement savings, right? 529 plans help people save for college because when you put money aside for a goal, you tend to not touch it, and then compounding works for you. The donor advised fund, just is a great tax advantaged account to do these things. And so when you put money aside in a donor advised fund, it's really the perfect experience. When you put money into a donor advised fund, you get the immediate tax deduction for that charitable contribution. So it's perfect for people who want to put money aside for charity, but don't know which charity to give it to right now. Or maybe they're putting money aside that they're going to give to an organization over the course of years, right? And have that compounding work for them. I mean, a lot of our members are actually just excited that they can find their tax receipts anytime they want. So there's just a real advantage to having a focused place for your giving. A lot of people love just being able to see what they gave to an organization. What did you give to your children's school last year? Common question, but how many people dig through their receipts or their email to find it? Now, the donor advised fund becomes even more impressive when you start thinking about donating things other than cash. Right. So it turns out if you donate appreciated stock, ETFs, mutual funds, even crypto, if you've held that investment more than a year, you get a deduction for the full market value of those securities. Right. And that's a deduction off income. Those are the highest tax rates. And the second bonus is you never pay the capital gains taxes. Right. So if you've been fortunate enough to have investments that you've held for years or even decades, the ability to not sell those shares, but instead donate those shares to charity is phenomenal. The problem is most charities aren't set up to take stock, to take ETFs, mutual funds, crypto. And so a donor advised fund is like that helpful assistant there who can take whatever investment you have, get you those tax benefits, and then deliver cash to any charity in the U.S. Daffy supports basically almost every legal charity in the U.S., over 1.7 million. And so it's really phenomenal. But the biggest benefit for the donor advised fund, I think is often not talked about, which is it allows you to actually, because you've put money aside for giving, it allows you to actually focus on the problem that most people want to focus on, which is giving. Who do you give the money to? Right? If you see people in need, if you see an event, right? Last year, the Maui fires, right? A lot of people wanted to act. The benefit of having put money aside for giving is it's there when you want to give. And so I think that there's a lot of benefits. Like I said, retirement saving, college saving, all these financial goals would be in a very different place if somehow it was in one giant pot that you had to sift through. And so a lot of the advantage of the donor advised fund, especially from a financial advisory standpoint, is just having a separate area to talk about that problem, to talk about those goals, and then having a plan behind it, just like any other financial goal. How much money do you want to put aside for giving? And that problem sounds like a hard problem, but the truth is, people are doing it anyway. Right? You can look at a client's giving over the last few years and actually assess, is this the amount you want to give every year? Do you want to be more generous? Are you thinking that in future years, maybe when you retire, you're going to spend more time on philanthropy? These are amazing conversations to have with a client about something that really matters to them and their families. And it even crosses over into multiple generations.
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of points, a lot of great ones. So I'm going to go one by one. The first one that I really like you talked about is just like purposes of dollars. I think really good financial planning is every dollar has a purpose. And so like when I work with my clients, even cash, right? We have an emergency fund, we have a travel fund, we have a house down payment fund, we have whatever those things are that we're saving for. Every account is segmented for that goal. And you're right, that applies to retirement accounts and it applies to giving, and it does lead to more efficient giving. And I want to re-highlight kind of the points of the donor advised fund, right? Because I think a lot of times people think about donor advised funds, and I think it's okay to give cash maybe early on, or maybe you just haven't built up taxable assets and you have assets in other ways, but you really shouldn't be giving through cash. Like almost none of my clients should be giving through cash, because at the end of the day, why would you not donate stock and then rebuy that stock back at a higher cost basis? It's pretty much a no-brainer. And for all my clients, we end up pretty much pairing it in their highest income earning years, right? Maybe it's post a liquidity event, and we haven't even got into the part about that you can do this with private shares, right? There's plenty of places that you can go with your private stock or the private business ownership you have. You can donate those shares ahead of time. And I think that's something most financial advisors don't know and don't think about. But pretty much, I'd say 99% of people who are going to sell a business should use a donor advised fund before they sell that business. But when you're doing this and you can give your gifting in 1 year, becomes really impactful, right? All of a sudden I have a huge bonus, or all of a sudden I have all these RSUs vested, or all of a sudden I sell my business. You can give a lot in those years. I have clients who in those years are going to do the next 20 years of giving in that 1 year that they're going to be in the 37% bracket. And then I have other clients who they do it and they can't use all of that deduction in that year. So we have a client right now who's doing $10 million of charitable giving through his business. He owns a pretty big C Corp. He's very high net worth, and he's donating $10 million. And you look forward and say, okay, can you get all of this offset in the next 5 years? And sometimes the answer is no, but then people don't realize a really good planning tool is you can sell a lot of stock in that period of time. That's going to add to your AGI, which is going to increase your income, which means you're going to get to offset a lot of income in those last couple of years. And when we all know that, I think the statistic is 14% of people itemize on their taxes. So that means almost everybody I sit down with, or most advisors sit down with, are not actually benefiting from their charitable giving. And the donor advised fund is the way to make sure that they do, right? Do 5 years in 1 year. Just do it through stock. And if you're a high income, high net worth person, that is pretty much a no-brainer.
Yeah, and that's you had a lot of good pieces of advice in there. But what I've seen is that for many people, that unlock code is just realizing that they don't have to make this incredibly large financial decision all at once. The donor advised fund frees them up to actually plan for the future, right? So a lot of Americans now have variable income. And yes, if you're fortunate enough to have a windfall, that happens too, and that counts as well, right? Like when your income is higher, there are good years and not so good years. Turns out with our tax system, in those good years, one of the rewards you get is a much higher tax rate. Yep. And so it's very often that people think about tax deductions, and one of the most generous tax deductions is around charitable donations. But the problem is, wow, that's a big decision. You're going to give a lot of money to a single organization in 1 year. What if that windfall came in November and December, right? Like you're going to make that decision in a matter of days and weeks. That's very difficult to do. Not to mention the fact that with the advantages of donating stock, funds, crypto, etc., most of the charities you want to support can't even take it. And so the idea that the donor advised fund frees you up to do that planning, right? That you can actually say, hey, it's a smart decision now to put this money aside, and then I'll figure it out, and give yourself the time to give the diligence it deserves, is so powerful. But the second thing you said that I love is realizing it doesn't have to be for 1 year, right? That we actually tend to give on an ongoing basis. And I'll tell you the secret, most charitable organizations care more about that than the actual dollars, right? Most organizations, charitable organizations, they have a team, right? They have facilities, they have services, and they want to offer those year in, year out, right? That church, that synagogue, that community center, it could be a zoo, the national organization you're supporting, they have to support the mission that they execute against every year. And so actually by putting money aside in something like a donor advised fund, you are actually freeing yourself up to give the way that those organizations want to receive, which is why, setting up recurring donations, et cetera, is so popular. And so, yeah, that idea, if you're fortunate enough to have a windfall, if you are fortunate enough to have one of those good years, looking to a donor advised fund to put aside money, not just for 1 year or 2 years, but 5 years, even 10 years. It's very common in Silicon Valley, these liquidity events, an acquisition, an IPO. But it's not just that. At Daffy, we have our members who are real estate agents, right? They're airline pilots. There's a lot of careers now that just have variable income.
Yeah.
And that's great in some ways, but when it comes to giving, right, no one wants to say to an organization they support every year, yeah, I can't do it this year, tough year, maybe next year. It doesn't feel good to us. It certainly doesn't feel good to the organization. And so the power of the donor advised fund to kind of put that money aside to plan it like a financial goal so that when you want to give, you have the money. I mean, we saw a lot of this at Daffy last year in 2023. That was not a great year for a lot of people, both in the markets and in work. Some were fortunate, but most people, it was a tougher year. But what we saw at Daffy is that the donation rate didn't change very much because people had put money aside and they had that money to give. And so that's just phenomenal. And then, of course, we can get into the tax details around things like you mentioned, like liquidity events and donating stock, et cetera. And there are a lot of advantages to advisors and clients when they have this extra tool in their tool belt, because one of the number one reasons that people don't make smart financial decisions is we're not always very rational about taxes. People will do unnatural things to avoid taxes. And the wonderful thing about having a donor advised fund and about giving in general is it's another way to kind of soften that blow and get yourself emotionally over the hump that the right thing to do is to sell some stock, right? To sell that fund you've held for a while, to take the win on an investment, and know that by putting some of that money aside for charity, your tax bill won't be so egregious. It won't be so imposing.
Well, when you look at the numbers in like a state like California, it's pretty hard to end up choosing not to, right? Like I have some business owners that are going to sell for 20, 50, $100 million, right? And if you think, okay, you have a $1 million basis and a $100 million company, let's say you donate $10 million, right? So you avoided, on average, what is that? Like almost $9.7 million of capital gains, right? Capital gains, you're going to see almost 37%. And then you're going to get a deduction against your income for that $10 million donation at 50.3%. So for a $10 million donation, it might cost you $2 million in the state of California. When people look at that, they're like, okay, I might be in $2 million worth of a spot. I'm going to have tons of money. I want to benefit charities. Most times what I find from successful business owners is post that liquidity event, charity now becomes their new thing. That is what keeps them going, right? Because if you retire from a business, most times you need to find something else that's going to grab your attention, that's going to keep you going. Charity's that one thing. And this becomes like such a good avenue to get started.
Oh, for sure. And just a small correction, those taxes apply to like a $10 million liquidity event, right? And look, the good news is when you have a liquidity event, let's be clear, that's good news, right? Anyone who's coming into $10 million is hopefully having a good day. They should. Taxes or not. And those taxes do fund a lot of services that are really valuable, right? They're public goods. But the reason the whole charitable giving system exists in the United States is because there are other public goods that are provided by organizations. And sometimes people want to have that intentionality, that impact, where they can deliver a more specific public good, right? This is why people give to their children's schools or to their, to other local causes, even a local food bank, right? There are national programs to help with hunger, but sometimes you want to make sure that people in your community are getting the support they want.
Totally.
And so the ability, stepping back on those liquidity events, et cetera, and that big tax bill, you can pay that tax bill, right? You had the liquidity event. But for a lot of people, they want some of that money kind of at their discretion to go towards public goods that they care about. And that's the amazing thing about the donor advised fund is you can put that money aside, you save on your taxes, but now you have more money to give. Right. And so that's phenomenal for the organizations that depend on those donations. And also it can be incredibly rewarding for your clients, for individuals to have that kind of impact and have that ability to think about, all that success that they've had, all of that work that they did. For a lot of people, I hear the same thing from members, that they don't want it all to be for them, right? That they want to give back. That was part of what they did. That's part of what living a good life is about. And that can be at an individual level. I've also seen it at the business level, right? And most people don't realize that donor advised funds are not just something you can open up as an individual, that actually any entity with a Social Security number that pays taxes can actually put money aside. And a lot of small businesses support organizations in the community. And the donor advised fund can help with all of that.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, I think one of the points you made earlier that always comes up when I have these conversations is, oh, but I give monthly, right? Like, I think that's the first hesitation to like, oh, if I'm gonna put stock into a donor advised fund, it turns into this thing that you can't give monthly. But with you guys, this is something that's easy, right? Like, can you set up automatic payments, or because I'm guessing, I don't think that's like something that's available at most custodians.
It depends. There's about 1,000 or so different providers of donor advised funds in the U.S., mostly very small and most very technically limited. And so a lot of them are even operating still off, emails and spreadsheets and PDFs and that sort of thing. But yes, I mean, I think actually automating, this is true with almost all financial goals. Automation is your friend, right? Absolutely. Be intentional, make a plan. Humans are actually good at that when they do it. We're just not good at sticking to plans. And so that's the place where you can actually let technology help you, right? So setting up recurring contributions, we have members at Daffy who donate stock regularly. They donate cash, right? You can link your bank account and have money move over every month if you want, every week, every month, every quarter, every year. So it's very easy to fund accounts that way, but you can also do it one-off. On the donation side, of course, recurring donations matter. And like I said earlier, most organizations prefer that. And so we support at Daffy. You can set up a recurring donation that goes out every month, every quarter, every year. Some people like to donate on anniversaries, right? Maybe you had a family member who passed away and you want to donate in their honor. What a nice thing to do, to donate on their birthday or on the day of their passing. Maybe it was a couple and the anniversary. I've seen people donate on the date of their retirement to an organization that they supported and worked for while they were working. So there are all these different ways and dates that are meaningful. Our perspective at Daffy is giving is meant to be meaningful. It's not just a financial task. And if there are dates and there's patterns that have meaning to you or work for you, great, we'll support it. Our mission is to help people be more generous more often. And that more often piece is really a big part of the automation that we support.
Yeah. I know we talked about this a little beforehand, and one thing that just came to mind again is, I had somebody reach out to me recently that's trying to build the company to help financial advisors help their clients allocate money in charity side of things. And how do you see people doing this? Because I do find that's an issue for a lot of people is, I want to give, I don't know where. And so maybe, I don't know if you have any practical points or things for advisors, like how can we better have these type of conversations and help people find those spaces? Because I think there's cause, but then there's also like the underlying charity, right? Just because you're a cause you believe in doesn't mean that's a good charity or a good allocator of money. And obviously all of us, if we're giving money, we want this to be something that truly is going to benefit that organization, those people, et cetera.
Yeah, so there's three ways to come at that. We spend a lot of time on this at Daffy because it's very important to people, and that's a very common question. In fact, I would argue that giving always involves two questions. How much money can I afford to give? And then who do I give it to? And one of the reasons we love the donor advised fund is it actually separates those two questions. Mm-hmm. Trying to solve both those problems at once is very, very difficult. Yeah. But when you're talking about where to give, we see people getting inspiration from three different places. One is actually local, right? Actually, one of the first features we added to Daffy was the ability, mobile app, etc., is to actually just explore the nonprofits in your area. Most people don't even know which food bank is near them. Right. And so using Daffy, we actually provide a geographic map. We actually did integration online so that we can show you where all those nonprofits in our database are color-coded by cause, and then you can click and explore and then learn more about them. All that publicly available information, how much money they've raised, how they donate, what efficiencies, third-party ratings, all of that information is there for you. The second way that people learn about what to give to, of course, is actually social. We learn from each other. And actually, this is one of the big problems we see is that without a tool that helps you do this, we don't even know what our friends and family give to, let alone our neighbors or coworkers, etc. And so one of the features we built into Daffy is that if you want, you can actually connect with other people and follow other people that you know and use them for inspiration. Find out that they give to certain charities and ask them questions about the organizations they support. I mean, a lot of us have experts in our networks. We know there are people who are passionate about different causes, and finding a platform, finding a way to connect with them and see what they give to and why they give to it. This is one of the reasons when people give on Daffy, we ask them optionally, do you want to leave a public note about why you give to this organization? I mean, we have reviews for almost everything else online. It's kind of amazing that we don't actually have it for charitable organizations, but we built that into the Daffy experience. I think the third way that people find inspiration what to give to, it's another version of social, but it's more specific, but we've seen it be amazingly popular at Daffy, which is around campaigns. So we've added another way to give at Daffy. So most donor-advised funds, there's only one way to give. You put a recommendation in, the donor-advised fund approves it, and money goes out to that charity. It's kind of like bill pay, right? Like you put in the information and it goes out. But at Daffy we said, listen, in the nonprofit world, actually what's very popular are matching campaigns, right? You have an organization or set of organizations you believe in, you want to support them. Instead of just giving them money, you say, hey, I'll match all the donations that are given. And what a perfect feature for a donor advised fund, because you've already put money aside. And so actually what we've seen is by putting internet campaigns together with the donor advised fund, letting people offer matching campaigns, you can get a lot of inspiration from other people about what they're fundraising for. And so that we've also seen that happen. But let's be clear, in the beginning, it's a little bit of a daunting task. I usually recommend to most people not to pressure themselves too much to try and solve that problem immediately. I mean, famous billionaires who have all the resources they can imagine still spend years figuring out how to have the most impact in organizations. And so don't put so much pressure on yourself to try and solve that problem at once. Giving is rarely something you have to do in 1 week or 1 month or 1 year. It's usually actually a lifetime exercise for people. And this is probably the reason I love the donor advised fund most, and I call it a better system for giving, is that it frees you up to have that time, to explore organizations. You can give a little bit, connect with that organization, integrate with them more, learn more about them, and then actually increase your giving as your confidence in that organization grows. You have time to explore your causes, etc. Now, we have a great search tool, right? You can search and find by all these different dimensions, like I said, geography, cause, keyword, etc. But I would discover for most people that this isn't a one-time task. It's not just a Google search and you're going to find the answer. This is something that's worth spending time on. Most people, while they're working, don't have as much time to do this, which is why the organizations they tend to support are the ones that are closest to them, right, and their families and their communities. But we see a lot of people, especially as they're approaching retirement or after retirement, spending more and more time on philanthropy. And in fact, they tend to want to involve their family members as well.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of great points there. I think the way that I think about this for a lot of people, especially higher income, higher net worth people, is they can separate the two, right? The donor advised fund contribution comes in opportunistic times, right? So that's liquidity events, high appreciation in securities, crypto, et cetera. It can be pairing with Roth conversions. It can be right after retirement to, again, pair with Roth conversions. Those all create these great opportunities to say, this is a great tax tool, but we also know that we want to give and we're going to give down the line, but we can isolate that. Let's make this decision and then let's make that decision. And the other thing is, I find most people that I work with are actually trying to really grow that after the donation. Like their goal isn't 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, this is going to be zero. It's actually, they're taking risk. You guys do crypto. I'm sure you see plenty of people use crypto and then stay allocated to crypto to continue to grow that asset. But if you think about it, some of my clients might be 10 plus million net worth in their 30s. They have this ability to do something really cool now with a few $100,000 that could be millions of dollars of donations down the line, and that actually not be what they're giving from in this intermediate time.
Yeah, we see a lot of philosophies that vary at Daffy. It's really amazing. People have different traditions, different mental frameworks about how they think about giving. But what you just described is one of the most popular, which is a lot of people putting money aside for charity and excited about the fact that it can grow tax-free, as
Yep.
they learn, that they can grow their impact. It's one of the reasons on the investment side we offer such flexibility on the investment portfolios, right? So when we launched, we had, like most donor advised funds, over a dozen different pre-built portfolios, everything from conservative portfolios in cash and bonds. We had low-cost index funds from Vanguard, ESG portfolios. And then uniquely, we had crypto portfolios, which most donor advised funds do not support, but have been very popular for people who say, hey, I'm going to put this money aside. I believe in where crypto is going. And just think what that wealth accumulation could do for all these causes and organizations that I care about. And so we see people do it on the contribution side. In fact, we had so much interest there, we actually a few months ago augmented our investment platform. And so now, actually, our members or their advisors, if they have advisors on the account, Daffy supports adding your advisory team to your account to help you make these decisions and execute these actions. We now support over 460 different low-cost ETFs on the platform. And so with your advisor, you can actually build a custom portfolio of up to 10 ETFs that are all automatically rebalanced. It's all invested tax-free. And there's something great about feeling like those gains go to charity. Yeah. Right. It's just a wonderful feeling. And so I like to joke about this. Of course, I'm a math guy. So, it turns out that 460 choose 10 gives you about 100 quintillion options. That's a lot. You probably shouldn't try them all. But I mean, for an advisor who is working with their client, knows what they value, knows how they like to invest, knows how they're thinking about things. If you have a client who likes that idea of putting money aside regularly and seeing that money grow, I mean, we mentioned this earlier, right? Like even my first donor advised fund experience, it was explained to me that, oh, you had a big year, you can put this money aside for charity, it's smart to donate stock. And by the way, you can think about how much you're going to give over the next 10 years, right? How much you give in a year, multiply it by 10. And guess what? Invested tax-free, you might get years 11 and 12, right? Yeah. Just from the gains. And so all these things are great motivations that help get people into the habit of putting money aside for charity. And then my experience has been, like a lot of other people, is that once you start down this path, you start realizing, wow, feels really good, and it's very flexible. And all of a sudden, it's top of mind. And so we see advisors help people not just with windfalls or not just with variable income, but even the basics of things like how to rebalance a portfolio or how to get out of a concentrated position. Once you have this magical account where you can donate stock, get this incredible tax advantage, and then see the money grow, all of a sudden, when you have a hammer like that, a lot of problems start looking like nails.
Yeah. Great points. I think one thing I want to hit on here is just as I work with a lot of business owners, and this is a tool that a lot of business owners consider. But a couple things that people need to think about. One of them is if you own a C Corp that's QSBS eligible, this is not the tool, right? Use something else for it because you're basically giving up the big benefit. You're already going to have the capital gains tax-free part. The second one is I've had some people who are like, oh, my business is valued a lot. I'm going to go donate this now. I don't know if I'm ever going to have a liquidity event. But there is a rule that if you don't have a liquidity event and it doesn't turn to cash within 5 years, you have a tax of 10% of the value of the donation. And this was something that I didn't actually know about because I've never seen somebody not do it like right before a liquidity event. But you don't want to donate a few $1 million and all of a sudden have a $300,000 tax liability because you never had a liquidity event come down the line.
Right. I mean, there are a lot of important. This is like everything with taxes. It's really not something for you to just, in my opinion,
DIY, not think about.
Do it yourself. You want to have a high quality accountant. Ideally, you want to have an advisor to run different scenarios because every situation is different. I'm not just talking about the state you live in and your tax situation. I'm talking about the fact that you have other financial goals. You have other things going on with your money. The great thing about giving to charity from a tax perspective, and this applies to the donor advised fund, is that actually it offers a solution for the hardest problems, right? It's the places where you have a low cost basis, where actually the tax impact would be significant if you sold that security. If you already have tax advantages elsewhere, doubling down on tax advantages sounds like a good idea, but it actually doesn't work, right? There's only so much to go around. So like you said, QSBS or money from tax advantage accounts rarely is the right answer. Sometimes, but rarely is the right answer. Usually the right answer is it's a complement to other strategies you have. So let me give you an example, right? And I know you know this, but a lot of advisors will talk about this. Rebalancing something people do every year, or they should do every year. And rebalancing naturally involves selling something that's done better than expected, and using those funds, right, to shore up an asset that hasn't done as well. That's what rebalancing ends up looking like. The problem is that generates taxes, right? But if you take those securities that have run up and donate them, and then use the cash that you would have used to donate instead to shore up that portfolio, all of a sudden it's much more tax efficient. Same thing applies, by the way, with concentrated stock positions, etc. Right? It might feel very expensive. You bought NVIDIA a few years ago. Good for you. Amazing. It's run up tremendously. But a lot of people are sitting on those positions, even though it's much, much too high as a percentage of their overall assets. That's risk they shouldn't be taking for themselves and their family. I love NVIDIA. I'm not saying anything bad about it. They're amazing chips and cards. But fundamentally, if you have to diversify, that idea of, oh, if I sold 1,000 shares, that would be a very expensive tax event. But maybe instead I sell 900 shares and donate 100 and cut that tax bill in half. That can be a way both for an advisor to help their client think about their taxes, but also to help get that client to a better financial position overall. And so there's just countless scenarios like that. Tax loss harvesting. There's so many tax strategies out there, but they very often leave you with these long-term investments that have low cost basis where they're kind of stuck. You don't want to take it. And having the donor advised fund really gives you a tool to say, no, I don't have to be stuck in this risky situation. I can actually do something about it and do something for the organizations and causes I care about. It's a really rare win-win.
Yeah. All really good points. Adam, this has been an awesome episode. Anything you feel like that we haven't hit on before we wrap up?
No, I would just argue that, it starts with the basics. Just get started. The donor advised fund flow that we have at Daffy, we're very proud of it, of course. New technology. You can go to the website. You can download it from the App Store. But there's a reason why one of the first questions we ask you is, how much do you give to charity every year? And we actually track it like a goal. It's a little bit like Apple Health. Whatever your number is. It could be $500, could be $500,000. But we actually try to track that and manage that. We have a family plan, so you can add children, grandchildren, siblings, parents, up to 24 people, add your advisors on it. But the biggest piece of advice I have for people is just to get started, right? Once you do it, you realize that this isn't actually rocket science. This isn't so difficult to do. And then all of a sudden, once you have it in place, then all of a sudden the idea of, oh, wait, I can fund this account with stock, ETFs. It becomes an annual thing you do, right? It'll be towards the end of the year and you'll be sitting there going like, oh, what do I need to do with my portfolio? What am I thinking my taxes look like? And you have now agency, you have power to influence it. And the best part is all that agency, all those savings actually go towards money put aside for charity, which is phenomenal. It feels good for you, and it certainly feels good for the organizations that get your support. So, yeah, my big piece of advice is just to get started.
Yeah, really good points. Adam, we really appreciate the time. Everybody, thank you for listening. If you want to check out more about Adam, he's on social media, Adam Nash on Twitter, LinkedIn, and then also the company is daffy.org. But thanks for listening, everybody. Please don't forget to rate and subscribe, and we'll see you back for another episode here in a couple weeks.